I was here until 1939. The wharf that I remember was Paddon's Wharf. There was Cribb's Wharf. There was Digger Pearce's Wharf and one other wharf, but I can't remember any others.
Well, Cribb's Wharf, to my knowledge, was the marine section. Then upriver there was Moss's Wharf, but this was after Beryl's had left. And then there was the Boat Shed Wharf, where Rex Montford used to tie up his boat. Then across the other side of the river was Teddy Rowan built a wharf.
When the war started, I went back to Sydney to go to school, and then my mother and the rest of the family came down 2 years later, except for my father, and he was here. And what they did was they collected all the boats, all the little skiffs and all the bigger boats, and they took them up the river, away from all the wharves. So my father, he had the oyster leases, and because they took all his boats away, he couldn't work his oyster leases. So eventually he gave up and came back to Sydney too. Jim Paddon's Wharf was what you would call T-shaped. If we got onto it, we got into trouble from Mr. Paddon. I know we used to get told we couldn't go on it, but we used to get on it and you'd run like mad when you saw old Jim coming. The other wharves, my mother wouldn't let us go over there. They were quite high from the beach. The river was quite deep then. The sandbar that goes out wasn't quite where it is now. They were quite dangerous to walk under too. There were lots of oysters and things underneath them, so Mum wouldn't let us go there. But my uncle came up from Sydney. He was a boat builder, and he built Jim Paddon's boat, the Gypsy. At the end of the wharf, facing the river, on the riverside, there was the Gypsy. There used to be a boat at the end of the wharf, and on the other T section was Dick Paddon's boat. And then on the inside, on the beach side, there was a huge big wire netting cage, and it was always full of lobsters, and the people used to come, go down onto the wharf, pick whichever lobster they wanted out of the cage. At the bottom of our place there was a big, it was more like a tank cut in halves, and that's where they used to tan all their nets.
I only remember what my husband George has told me, that he used to take oysters down to the RAF crash boat wharf and barter some oysters for some petrol so his dad could take the punt up and tend the oyster leases until maybe that was stopped, I don't know, but it also worked well at the butcher's. If you took some oysters up there, it's marvellous what meat used to come back.
There was shops, but the fruit chap used to come round with a lorry with all their fruit on the back of the lorry, and he'd get down to our place. If there was anything left, he'd say, "You like this, Mrs. Humphrey? Would you like this? Have that?" And Mum would give him a few oysters.
These couple of fishing boats that were here, like Jim Paddon's boat, the Gypsy, and poor old Dick Paddon, his brother, he had the Jason, and they were basically only kerosene motors, you know. There was no outboard motors around. Beryl's dad moved back to Sydney, and the family moved back to Sydney. Arthur still had the oyster leases here, but Dad maintained them. And then when war broke out, he was on the aerodrome working. He tried to enlist on at least 2 occasions, and they'd say, you know, "What are you doing? Where are you from?" He'd say, "The aerodrome at Evans Head." Get back there straight away. The officers' mess used to have a function out there quite regularly, and Dad would get the oysters, and also he'd go up the river spotlighting, put the crab straight in the boat, take them out the drome, you know, and they used to cook them out there, so the officers' mess didn't live too bad really, like on oysters and crabs, and Evans Paddon there, he had the Rogeree, which was the flagship. She was a 60-odd foot. Then he got the Challenge. She was about 80 foot. Then he got the Carolyn R, which was roughly, she was built locally, a Steely, but she was built. But he used to moor them up at the end of this old wharf that's down there behind the RSL now, and you couldn't even tie a rowing boat up there now. That's how much water's here. So yeah.
Yeah, we used to jump off it.
Yeah.
to swim?
Furthest wharf, that changed hands many, many times. But it was a rowboat hire place and canoe hire place. And it serviced all the cabins that used to be along the waterfront and whatever, yeah. Lester Cribb took over the marine section wharf for his own boats. Evans, Paddon's jetty continued on, and Evans ended up with quite a few boats there. I suppose you'd say in the heyday here, I think we had very close on 50 trawlers operating out of here, all shapes and sizes. There's more boats swinging at anchor in the river than you could poke a stick at. There was boats tied up to the wharf like ticks hanging off a dog. And
well, I do remember the big boat shed there where they hired out the canoes, and it was also a milk bar. It was also when we used to come up here for holidays in the 60s, 70s and 80s. It was painted really colourful colours, and they used to hire out rowboats, and they used to hire out those boats that they paddle, like a big paddle wheel, because Ian, my son, used to get onto that. And that was a bit sad when that was removed, but I can't remember when that was pulled down. But also the Seven Seas, the charter boat, I remember that, using the wharves. Everyone used to use the wharves, I think. They were really, could you say, they were like the centre
it was
Evans Head for years, with the fishing and the prawns. So how many wharves are left now?
Yeah, well, that's right.
That's only Evans Paddon's wharf,
yeah, and it's just hanging on by its toenails.
Just there, and that's all.
That's all that's left.
Yeah.
But last year they had all the final year students all dressed up in their finery, and girls in their nice dresses and the boys in their nice suits, and they took them all down and put them on the wharf to take their photo, and the whole thing collapsed. And the kids all ended up in the river.
Been some changes. We've seen some good times, Beryl, haven't we?
Yes.